Welcome to Beyond Sport with Fiona Stewart. If you've been listening for a while, welcome back. If you're new to the show, I'm your host Fiona. My passion for sport really started when I was a competitive swimmer. This led me to study sport development at university whilst also working within the sporting industry. I'm a huge believer in sport being used as a tool for good. Each week, I'll bring you an episode with someone involved in the sporting world. It could be your local high school teacher or your childhood or current sporting hero. The difference is that it's not your typical type of questions. We talk about the highs and lows in their journey through sport, but also what they've learned from it and how it's made them who they are today. There's also a strong focus on how being involved in sport can impact the community. If you haven't already, make sure you hit follow wherever you're listening so you don't miss the drop of each new episode. If you're after some bonus content, then you can check out our Instagram or Facebook page at Beyond Sport with Fiona Stewart. In this episode, we talk with Sami Palmer, a world champion tumbler from the UK. Sami talks about what got her started in gymnastics and what lessons she got from over a decade competing on the international circuit. She's now enjoying her time, making her impact on the Australian gymnastics scene and sharing her knowledge and experience with the next generation. I hope you find Sami's energy and passion as magnetic as I did. So, can you please tell us a little bit about your sport and how you got into it?
Absolutely. So my sport was tumbling, which is a discipline of gymnastics. I actually got into it by chance. So I did artistic gymnastics when I was little because I was way too hyperactive at home. So my mum was a gym coach. So she basically just took me with her every day to burn off some energy. So that's how it started. And then at 6 years old, I got picked out by a Russian coach to be in a squad. So the journey sort of continued. And when I was 11, we had a tumbler that came into the gym and sort of, he did his training and he was watching us artistic girls and he said, she's really powerful. You should come and try some tumbling. So I did, I tried it and I won a few competitions and actually got selected to represent Great Britain at a World Age Championships at 11 years old. So that was the intro. But I mean, right back at the start, it was a hyperactive child. Mum was like, I need to burn off this energy and just threw me in the gym. It's, that was the beginning.
No, I like that. And I think that gymnastics is such a multidiscipline sport in terms of you've got different areas to go into. So can you tell us, because I have no idea, tell us a little bit about what artistic gymnastics is? Tumbling, obviously, I'm oh yeah, that's kind of like somersaulting, but tell us the difference between them.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's quite a few disciplines in gymnastics. You've got men's artistic, women's artistic, acrobatic, rhythmic, trampoline, and aero. I think parkour is actually a part of gymnastics too now. So artistic gymnastics is what you see at the Olympics commonly, with the vault bars, beam floor for women. And for men, there's 6 apparatus. It's vault floor, pommel, P-bars, rings, and high bar. And then obviously your rhythmic has your hoops and your ribbons and the ball and the clubs. And then acrobatics is the, men and women throwing each other up and down. What else have we got? Aero is sort of very dance based, I guess you'd say. There are and of course, not forgetting trampoline. So trampoline, which is an Olympic discipline. And tumbling and double mini trampoline, we compete alongside trampoline, but we're non-Olympic. So you've got an umbrella of trampoline sports with only men's and women's individual actually as an Olympic discipline. But, we have our own circuits of World Cups, World Games, which is every 4 years. Lots of awesome events still. So there is an array, and once you get into gymnastics, there's so many different pathways depending on what you love, your talents, and where you want to take it. So it is really a great sport to get involved in because it's so foundational too. And we might touch on this later on too, but a lot of gymnasts go on to other sports. So it's a base
Mm-hmm.
for aerial skiers, for swimmers, for divers, because it's fine motor skills, it's gross motor skills. You build so much development at an early age that it's really such a pathway into many things.
It's interesting that you mentioned the swimmers because I used to be a swimming coach, and a lot of the juniors, and I'm talking like under 12s, that were quite
Mm.
good swimmers at that point, they did gymnastics and I loved it. I'm like, yes, I've got a gymnast. And they just knew how to turn their feet out, or they were really good at like the little things like the turns and stuff. They were very easy to coach.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different elements. You've got the strength part, you've got the spatial awareness, you have the flexibility. So, like it's all the building blocks really that translate across to so many other sports. So it's, yeah, I highly recommend it for any young children because it just really develops so many skills, not just physically too, but mentally.
So my next question is like, is there a specific moment that you knew you were passionate about it? Because you started very young. So where along the
Mm.
journey did you know gymnastics was your thing?
Yeah, so I just used to love it. I would be so excited jumping out of my seat every day to get into the gym, to learn something new, to push the boundaries. And I always remember it. I had my first competition at 6 years old, and, I competed. I had a really fun day. And when it was the presentations, I actually came last. And I remember feeling so disappointed. I was like, oh no, I want to win that. Like I love this sport, and it was just that point for me. It was like a real driver to just get back in, and I just had that burning desire to go in and really achieve things. So yeah, that for me, I think I knew it was my thing, and I just loved it. I loved being in the gym. I loved being around the people there, and being able to challenge myself from a young age. And I'd watch the bigger kids, and I was like, okay, I want to do that. That's what I want to do, and it was just a really happy place.
Oh, it's awesome to hear that. And it's interesting hearing people's responses in terms of like if there was a specific moment or if it just kind of evolved over time. And I could probably pinpoint my moment when I liked swimming, but or there's probably been a few different defining moments. But like I like when I hear someone
Mm.
else's moment, I'm like, yes, there was a moment that you were like, yep, this is you can reflect back and go, this was for me.
It's funny because throughout the career, as you progress along, too, there's so many moments where you really question things. When it gets challenging, and you're like, oh, do I really want to do this anymore? But just thinking back to those moments that are so joyful and happy, and you're just in your zone, that really goes, yeah, it validates it. It kind of goes, yeah, it's still there. I still want it. Yeah. So I think, yeah, definitely that moment for me though when I was little. It's like, this is it.
Yeah, and it's awesome that you had that at such a young age as well, because then that gave you that,
Mm.
push to get through those, harder years when there's other distractions in life. You talked us through starting at 11 in an international level. What other significant
Mm.
milestones have you had along your journey?
Yeah. Oh, quite a few to be honest. Some really positive and some not so. So I went to my first international tumbling event at 11. I finished seventh, and at that time it was sixth through to final. So I just missed out on that final. I came back from that event, and my coach said to me, "Look, we have to make a choice. You can continue with your artistic gymnastics. We'll get you to the Olympics," because I was in an Olympic development squad. He said, "or you can be a world champion tumbler." So I was 11 years old. So I've gone, I want to be a world champion. So that was quite a significant moment for me because it was making that decision of, okay, well, do I pursue the Olympic dream, or do
Hmm.
I step into a non discipline and be the best at it? Like it was a very challenging decision, but I think there were certain aspects of artistic gymnastics I didn't love, like the flexibility, the bars, and the choreography. Actually, I'm not too much of a dancer. So for me, it was quite, I loved the adrenaline. I loved vault. I loved tumbling. I loved all the fast things and the somersaults. So sort of a no-brainer. So that was a pretty significant moment. The next World Championships that I went to, I actually won. So I had come back off my first one at 11 years old, and I was like, oh, I just wanted to make the final. I should have been in the final. So I just worked for 2 years and researched and watched the rest of the world. And, you know, by the time I went to the next World Age Championships, I think I was 13 or turning 14. Made the final. And for me, you know, that moment I was like, I've done it. I've ticked that box, because my aim for that event was going final. Like, that was all I wanted to do. I qualified in second place, so there was a whole like scurry and fuzz, and everyone's going, oh my gosh, you could get a medal. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool, like, but that's a bonus, you know, like I've actually already achieved what I came to do. So I was so relaxed, and everyone's going, oh my God, Sam, like, this is, you know, this is big. Why aren't you taking this seriously? I'm like, yeah, I am, guys. Like, but I'm just really happy with what I've already done. And I think, you know, winning the gold at that event, realizing that I was so relaxed and I was in a very comfortable place. There was the nerves weren't there, because anything from that point forward for me was a bonus, because I was so happy that I just made the final. So I think that really set my future self up as well, because I really learned some valuable things at that event to be able to just enjoy the moment. And when you're really enjoying it, you know, you've done the hard work. You know, your physical ability is not going to change when you get to a competition, but the way you can control your mindset, like, that makes all the difference. So coming off the back of that event, you know, went home on an adrenaline rush. And I guess the next significant moment for me was actually 2 years later. So the World Age is every 2 years. I actually went back and won again. So I was the first British athlete to take the title consecutively. And again, I think, you know, I'd prepped well. I, you know, kept researching internationally. What's everyone doing? What do I need to do? And just kept my calm. You know, there wasn't the nerves. Of course, there's nerves. There's always nerves. And it was like, oh wow, if I do this, I'll be the first athlete. But you know, it was never the accolades and the medals. Of course, they're lovely to have, but I think for me, it was always comes back to that passion. I was so passionate about the sport. I loved doing the sport, and I enjoyed the sport. That's what kept me going, and that's what kept driving me. So yeah, my career carried on in a very positive trajectory, and it kept going. But unfortunately, in 2004, my first ever year of senior competition, I actually completely snapped my cruciate ligament in my left knee, I want to say. So that was really hard. You know, that was huge. I had surgery. I had a complete knee reconstruction, and I was actually told that I wouldn't be able to tumble at a high level again by the surgeon. So that wasn't what I wanted to hear, and I wasn't willing to accept that. So I went through about 6 months of intense rehab, and to be honest, like, set out to prove everybody wrong, which I did. So, you know, it was hard work. There was a few times I wanted to give up at that point, but seeing the rest of the team continuing to travel overseas, you know, it just drove me more. I was like, I should be on that team. That should be me. Oh, so yeah, I kept going, pretty much defied all the odds. And the following year was on the senior team for the World Championships, and finished actually third individually on the podium. So, you know, after 15 months, I think it was, from snapping the cruciate ligament to being on the podium at a senior World Championship. So that was a pretty significant time, I'd say, in my career.
Yeah, wow. And like, how people go about injuries and like recovering from those injuries tells, I think, in my opinion, a lot about like their resilience as a person. I know I've had a few injuries, and they've said to me that I'd never be able to swim again. And like, I hear all the time athletes going, I'm not accepting that. And then they do major rehab to be able to get back to either where they were or just even be able to play their sport again. Was there, like, other than the moment where you're like, I'm not going to listen to that, there would have been hard moments in there where you were like, why am I doing this? Like, was there that questioning moment in there?
Absolutely. It was so hard having to go to the gym and watching everyone train and not being able to. And I mean, with my surgery, they took my hamstring and twined it like around the ligament and drilled it through the bones. So I had to fully recover and repair the hamstring. So the hamstrings grow back. So that you have 4 and they took 2. So I actually had to learn to walk again. I had to learn to run again because, you know, like your hamstrings are quite delicate. So it wasn't something that I could rush. And I could see everyone else improving and I could see myself, like I was doing basic skills and getting dizzy and, you know, like almost having to relearn them because the spatial awareness was a little off. And, you know, there was, of course, like that nervousness around, oh my God, is this going to, like, am I going to snap a hamstring now or is it going to break or it feels so different? And you want to protect yourself. That's, I think, you know, as human beings, our intuition, like we have that fear and we put up this barrier because it's survival, right? And it was like, okay, Sam, be realistic about this. You're going to survive. You're going to be fine. Got to take that fear out and just keep going, you know, relearn. And I had a good team around me and it wasn't easy. And there are absolutely times where I just wanted to chuck the towel in. But every time I saw one of the other, you know, girls post up a new tumble or, you know, they'd travel overseas for a World Cup, it would just trigger me again. And I'm like, no, I am not done. So I think, you know, it is hard. It's an uphill battle. But when you know, like if you're not done and you want to be back on that floor, like you'll dig deep and find the determination and the ways to do it.
Yes, and I like the fact that you say you'll dig deep and you'll find a way to do it because that's what even life is about, like digging deep and finding a way to do it. You competed internationally for 9 years. That's a huge stint for international gymnasts because like usually they start very young and retire very young. Where was the point where you decided to stop competing internationally?
So if I'm totally honest, I left the international scene way too early. I still had another easy 5, 6, 7 years in me. So I came back from my knee reco and competed at the Senior Worlds in 2005. And then there was a lot of politics and things going on in my home club. And my Russian coach, who I had had since 6 years old, he left. At that point, there was a lot of talk. You know, I'd been number 1 for a long time. And it was like, oh, well, that will be the end of Sam. And so again, like, you know, I wasn't ready to accept that. And looking back, I should have probably gone with my coach to another club. But, you know, I was 17. I had a partner. I had a job. It was home. So I wasn't ready to move my life. So I kept going. I trained on my own actually for 2 years. We had a lady flying from Ireland to help out every week. But, you know, having had a Russian coach who was incredibly technical my whole life, to then, you know, a very different coaching style. Over that 2 years, you know, I still learnt new skills. I still put out new passes. I went on to win, you know, 5 or 6 World Cups, Senior European Championships, World Cup finals. So, you know, I was still there, but slowly some skill issues began to creep in and, you know, it really became more than a mountain to climb. You know, I was starting to lose the enjoyment of it. You know, I didn't have anyone left to train with, so it was me and myself. And, you know, I was missing that technical side of the coaching. The rest of the whole British team were from up north. I was the only one from down south. So, you know, I didn't feel as connected. And over the 2 years of the traveling and competing, I just really started to lose the love for it because of all the different circumstances. So once the skill issues got quite bad, I went to the World Championships in 2007. And when I left, I went home and I actually just walked out and I never went back into the gym. So that to me, that was my last international event. That was when I stopped on the international circuit. Looking back, I regret that. I wish that I had swallowed my pride and, you know, gone and seen my coach, not been so stubborn for once, because I don't feel done. But in saying that, I do strongly believe that finishing when I did opened up a lot of new doors for me, and the opportunities that I have today and where I am today. So, I'm a believer of everything happens for a reason. And whilst I might not feel like I finished my career as an athlete, I definitely feel like I'm now contributing on the other side of that. So, yeah, it's been a journey.
It has. And like the fact that you are now in Australia, so you're in a different country, but you've been working with like the New South Wales Institute of Sport, you worked with Gymnastics New South Wales and Gymnastics Australia. So that is incredible that you're able to still make that contribution to the sport that you loved as a kid.
Yeah, and look, I thank my whole career and the time in the sport, because without that and without getting, to where I did and learning what I did along the way, there's no way I'd be in the position today. And having lived it, having been the athlete that didn't know where to go to after finishing, back then there wasn't as much around the well-being and helping athletes transition out. So I was lost. I had no idea what to do. So, I ran from the problem, and landed in Australia. So, I'm so passionate now on the other side of things in helping athletes, through their career and then transition out of that and deal with, a lot of the things that you have to deal with as an athlete, whether that's injury, whether that's the mindset, whatever it might be, because it is a roller coaster. There's no other way to describe it. You have your real high points, but you have your huge lows, and you can go from a high to a low in a day. Finish competing too early, but I just, I'm grateful for that too, because it's led me here. So yeah, very, very happy.
And it allows you to use that lived experience to help other athletes who might, still feel like there's stuff left in the tank and they're not done with their sport, but they've been forced to retire or stop competing because of injuries.
Yeah.
So, or other reasons, like there's many reasons life throws at us. It's in a unique, special position, and it means that you're able to do great work there. Next question is, if you could go back and relive a moment in your sporting journey, what would it be and why?
Oh, there's so many. I think probably, actually, probably winning the World Age Championships for the second time. That was really, really special. That was, yeah, to be the first athlete to do it, to prove to myself that I could do it, to have put out some new tumbles, like that was probably a real key moment, and just something and just the venue was great, the team was great, the people were great, and off the back of that, we had some of our younger athletes, one of which I trained with at the time, in the next stage group down, and she won a silver medal too. So just the whole sort of week long period of being there was just such a magical time. So yeah, I think I would go back to that, because I think, like, we had such a strong team of girls, and we had such a great bond and connection. And when you're surrounded by people that are just, on the same wavelength of you, and you support each other and you're all there for each other and you have a really good bond, like that absolutely helps in your performance, and, the way you handle yourself on the floor, and just the way you uplift each other. So I think, yeah, it was a really, really great competition, that one. So I'd love to go back and do it all again.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's cool that it was the one that you kind of made history for as well for your country. It's like it's the first time someone had done that.
Yeah, there's been so many, moments throughout that were just amazing, and sometimes not even on the competition floor. We traveled around the world so much. We went to, one of the places that stick in my mind. We did a World Cup back to back in Montreal and Lake Placid in America, and the lake was frozen over, and we stayed in these like log cabins, and again, it was like the athletes and your teammates that you travel with, they really become your family, because you spend so much time together in training and traveling and competition that, like they're your family. And even now, I have so many friends around the world, and when we travel, and even around Australia, people I used to compete with, and I'm seeing them again, and it's more than the competitions and the medals, and that's something I think I love about sport is it brings people together, and you just bring out the best in each other, because that's what it's about. And yeah, so I think so many of my memories, and even going back in time, at the end of every competition, we'd have a big celebration party, and just the people, I just, it's one of the things I really miss. And I was actually lucky enough in 2018 and 2019 to go as the team manager for the Australian team for World Championships. And walking back in after so long away from the international circuit, seeing, a lot of the athletes that I used to train with are now coaching for Great Britain. And it was like a big reunion, people from around the world, from Russia, everywhere. And it was like, it was just so magical. And those connections are special, and if it wasn't for the sport, I would never have made them. So yeah, so much more than the performance itself.
That's incredible. And it's cool that you've said, you almost said my catchphrase, or like the message behind the podcast to the word. It's when you said that it's more than just competitions or just medals, because, sport is more than just your performance. There's so many little things, and different people get different things out of it, but there's so much to it that I don't know if we discuss as much, like in terms of, like, you see on the news and you see, oh, this person won this medal or this team won this championship. And you're like, yeah, but there's got to be more. Like, there's a person who's developing behind there. And what about the person who came second or fourth, or, who didn't even make the final? Like, there's so much more than typical media, I guess, speak about. And that brings me to my next question is, like, what's the benefit sports provided you as an individual that's transferred over to, like, outside of sport areas?
Yeah, and like, I didn't win every competition either. There was times I didn't make a final, I didn't complete a tumbling pass, I fell over, and like you said, there is more to that. What about those people? And some people, their biggest achievement is getting on the team, and that in itself is a fantastic achievement, because it's not about the podium. The times when you don't get the result you want, you're building resilience. You're learning how to cope with hurdles. When you get injured and you have to really work hard to get back. Sport as a whole, and even the friendships and connections, you're learning skills that do transfer into life after. As you do progress through a sport, and if you get to an elite level, you learn so much around rest and recovery, around nutrition, around mindset. Mindset, I think, is very underrated sometimes, because it's like the biggest piece of the puzzle if you don't have the mindset. And so many of these things you learn within sport, and you leave the sport and you carry those skills with you. So, like, there's so many examples, but yeah, it really is. Like, it's not even, I guess, if you talk about performance and skill development, you have to learn to walk before you can run. It's that, that famous catchphrase. But it is learning patience, it's understanding breakdowns of things. And yeah, sure, it's all applied to elite sport, but you take that into a corporate world, it's the same thing. You can't just get this huge end result without doing all these little steps beforehand. So yeah, so many different lessons learned within sport that transition across.
So has there been, like, one big overall benefit? I know you spoke about, like, the travel and the friends and those relationships. Has there been one thing that you can, like, go, okay, that's the main thing gymnastics gave me?
Yeah, I would say probably resilience is the biggest one. Like, I definitely learned along the way how to be resilient. And off the back of that, also self-belief, I think, is a huge one that I learned. And, on that one, I had two World Cups, and I was, physically at the same state for both of them. Same tumbles, same passes, physically ready. One of them I went to, I actually forgot my passport on the way to the airport. So the team checked. I know, shocking. So the team checked in and left for the World Cup, and I was still at the airport, so I had to go home, get my passport, and get a flight 2 days later. So, I turned up. Everyone's like, oh my God, you've missed all the training. And I was like, oh, that's okay. It doesn't matter. I had one session on the tumble track, and like it's not like a swimming pool that, I mean, other than the temperature, I guess, water's water. Like there's not too much else that changes. But with the tumble track, you can have firmer tracks, softer tracks, different color tracks, all sorts of different variables that take some tweaking of technique to get used to. So I was like, that's all right. It doesn't matter. I know I can do my tumbles. I've got this. And I just went in and I knew, like, I wasn't stressed. I knew that I could do them in my sleep, and I believed in myself. So I actually ended up winning that competition despite, not departing with the team and everyone laughing at me when I got there. And off the back of that, or a couple of weeks later, we had another World Cup. And it was a longer flight. And to be quite frank, I didn't really want to be there at that World Cup. So my mindset and, everything going in was totally different. Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, this is a really rubbish tumble track. And I actually didn't even complete a tumble pass at that event. And, like physically, I was in prime condition, but my self-belief, my attitude, and my mindset, polar opposites. And it just goes to show with performance. And, at the time, I guess, you're building these skills, and so you often don't necessarily realize it until a later point, and you look back and you can go, wow, and you're just learning these skills along the way. And yeah, I think resilience definitely, nothing ever goes perfect all the time, but to be able to manage that, and come back from that, it's a really, really great skill to have. And you learn it in sport, not just gymnastics, in any sport.
Is there a lesson along the way that you'd want to share? So either to a younger version of yourself or some even kids in Australia that you're now mentoring?
The biggest one for me is probably, as I mentioned earlier, towards the end of my career, when I let my stubborn traits get in the way, and I was, I'm going to another club. I'm not going to go see my coach. He left me. Looking at the time, I never really understood what happened, why he left. To me, I felt like he didn't care. I've learned so much since then that looking back, I fully understand the choices he had to make, and, he left and what went on. But, at the time, because I was so stubborn and I didn't go and see him, like, ultimately, like, the skill issues I had led me to just, put everything in the too hard basket and leave the sport. So I guess what I would say is, sometimes you have to put some of your traits to one side, really figure out what you want. And, you might have to make some decisions and do some things that you don't love, but it's going to help you in the long run. So, yeah, I mean, we can all get very caught up with emotion sometimes, and you really have to remove your emotion from your decision making and really revisit what you're doing and why, and do some things that, are going to help you to get there that might not be something you want to do, but something you need to do. So, yeah, just prioritizing the important things.
That's such a good lesson. And it's not even like isolated in a sport context. Like you can do that in life, you can do that in work, you can do that in families, like going to a family dinner that you don't want to, but you know that you should go.
That for me has definitely carried over into life, and it's something I'm trying to teach my kids now too, because there's definitely some resistance 101 with schoolwork. Some days it's like, yeah, but you need to look, what do you want to be when you're older? Okay, I want to do this. All right, well, you might not like this now, but this is going to help you get there. And looking at the bigger picture, which at the time I probably didn't do. So yeah, it absolutely carries over into everyday life.
100%. Now, have you been involved in, I guess, a project or an event where sport's been used as a tool to develop the community? Because we've just spoken about how it develops an individual, but how does it develop more than one person, I guess?
So I was involved in a women in sport a big day, like to raise awareness and bring as many women as we could into sport, which was really awesome. Also, one of the jobs I did back in the UK alongside competing was I actually went around into primary schools and did some talks and, ran some little PE lessons for the kids to really encourage participation in sport and talk to them about my experience to inspire them. And that was something I absolutely loved doing. And it was, it was great for the kids to get to meet someone, and I would take my medals along and to really just open up their eyes to some of the opportunities that sport can give you, but also, the benefits of being involved in sport. So there's been a few projects along the way that I've been involved in, and I just think, as I said earlier, sport really brings people together. So the more we can all do together and do community events, that the happier our next generation are going to be.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And I love that both of those are about getting people involved in sports, whether it's women or whether it's children. So where do you see the future of sport?
So the future of sport, I think, it's definitely still evolving. I think there's so many amazing community programs out there for younger kids and, the next generation. I can only see it getting bigger and just continuing to evolve. And I do think it's slightly harder to get volunteers and things these days, especially like in gymnastics where I work. But I think there's so much love and joy that sport brings that it's never going to die. It's just going to go bigger and better. I can just see it really taking off, especially here in Australia. It's such an outdoor country. My kids love playing sport. I don't know any kids that don't love playing sport. And there's so many, new sports, even parkour now. You've got the younger kids who just love to learn to flip and to, that adrenaline rush. And I think there'll just always be new things coming out, and, even some rule changes in certain sports can make it more exciting. So, I think it's only really going in a positive direction.
I agree, and I think you're doing amazing things to contribute to the future of sport.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. That's really lovely. And look, I try. I'll do what I can, and I think things like this, and you doing what you're doing. And I did a gymnastics specific one the other day, a podcast, and the more we can get messages out there, it's just going to keep inspiring kids. So thank you too. You're doing absolutely amazing things.
Oh. But thank you for coming onto the podcast. I know we've had real fun with the tech. Thank you so much. And I think the future of sport is bright, but I think it's, the future of gymnastics is brighter because you're a part of it.
Oh, thank you. Look, I and there's so many incredible people in sport and, in gymnastics that are really doing some great things and driving it. And I think we're all invested in it for the right reasons, and it can only get better.
That's it. Well, thank you again, Sami. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for your contribution to Australian sport. No, I really appreciate it.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Sport with Fiona Stewart. This is a completely independent podcast that has been created to share the journey and lessons of top-level sporting professionals, but also your everyday lover of sport. If you liked this podcast, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a review and share it with someone who you think would also enjoy it. Until next time.